Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efene, the Malabite.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, our viewers. We start the review with this day Nigeria's newspaper of record. The lead story: Tinubu, festering reprisal attacks in Plateau, Benue, depressing, avoidable. Order security agencies to fish out perpetrators of recent killing. Says suspects must face full wrath of law. Warns circle of violence dismantled. House asks IG NSA to declare national emergency. Benue governor proposes amnesty for repentant criminals. Traditional ruler narrates gruesome killing of 30 people. Enugu Kaduna governor seeks military assistance to tackle insecurity. Yes, in the last 1 week, we've been reporting number of deaths of Nigerians who have been killed in clashes, attacks in the Plateau state and Benue state, as well as insecurity in other parts of the country. Now, the president has come out with a statement, which sounds familiar, ordering the military, ordering the security agencies to fish out the perpetrators. Well, if the security agencies, the heads of the various security, have to wait for an order from the president to do the needful, then we have a problem. Because the president described this as reprisal attacks. If there are attacks and counter-attacks, another word for reprisal attacks, then it means there is an intelligence that should tell you that attacks will follow attacks, and nothing is done. And even in the cases of notice of attacks being given, nothing was done, and the attack took place. Well, we hope this instruction, directive, order from the president and commander-in-chief will be respected and carried out, because we have a country where it was part of our recent history that the president and commander-in-chief gave instruction to the inspector general of police to relocate to Benue and deal with the insecurity there. That IG did not obey. He stayed put in Abuja. So beyond the order from Aso Villa, instruction, directive, we want to see concrete action to prevent further escalation, further deaths, because the primary duty of government is to protect lives and property. Beyond policies, economic policies, which this government seems to have taken very seriously. If people are dying like chicken every day in parts of the country, then it's like there is no government in place, because that is the primary duty of government. Protect lives, protect property. And what we have right now is, yes, quite discouraging. And we hope the president will live up to the speech, this statement put forward. But we want to see beyond order that action are taken, concrete developments on the ground to forestall further degeneration of the security situation in Plateau. Of course, political solutions. Yes, the government should call all the stakeholders and find a political solution. If politics is at the roots, as being claimed in certain quarters. Now, the other story in the front page of this day, Abdullahi Adamu, I supported Lawan, but won election for Tinubu, says APC willing to receive Wiki-led G5. Of course, the point was made by Ruben. A man has the right to support whichever candidate he has chosen. And if you are still asking whether who gave the name of Lawan, the then Senate president. Well, I remember in that speech at that time, when the chairman of APC, Abdullahi Adamu, came out, he was specific that that happens to be the choice of the incumbent president then, President Muhammadu Buhari. And you only need to go back to the video of that convention and watch the body language, the change in the countenance of the president then, President Muhammadu Buhari, as things unfolded at the APC convention. Yes, his moment. He said he's a good party man, and I think you can't take that from him, because after that convention, he did what he had to do, worked tirelessly for the election of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is the president today. Well, let's look at other stories quickly. The Guardian newspaper, Akpabio, 13 senators to earn over 5.6 billion naira ex-governor's pension benefit. Yes, Otumba Gbenga Daniel Ojide set that example by refusing or stopping his pension allowance from Ogun State. And I'm sure the good people of Ogun State will take note of that. And Nigerians expect other governors to follow this example. Perhaps we should just even go beyond, leaving this at the discretion of these men. Going forward, perhaps to enact a law, even if we cannot stop these pensions, that when you are receiving this pension after just 8 years of service, because that's what it is. After 8 years of service as governor, you are entitled to humongous pension for life. Even if we cannot stop that, at least we should have a law in place that once you are elected to another government position where you are receiving salaries and benefits, this one should be suspended. Your pension at the state level should be suspended. But we must also add that in this category, we also have President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the Vice President Shetima, the SGF, Akume, all ex-governors who are also entitled and are receiving pensions. Are they also going to continue with double salaries? So we should not just limit it to senators. The presidency is also loaded with ex-governors. So we move on to another story. The Punch newspaper, Naira devaluation. Nigerian students face tough times in UK. Tuition fees soars by 60%. New forex rate threatens overseas students. Indebted scholars barred from classes. Parents beg federal government for concession as tuition living cost climb amid forex crisis. What do they expect the government to do? To give concessionary rates? We'll be talking of another double exchange rate. The exchange rate has been, the Naira has been floated and it's finding its level. Everybody should adjust. If your child is in UK, you know what that means. That appeal cannot be granted, should not be granted, because you'll be creating another window. Everybody will now want to send their children to school in the UK to get concessionary rate. No. We have one rate right now, and it should stay that. If you are not comfortable with your child continue in the UK, there are universities in Nigeria. So, if you must do it, well, good for you. You have the resources, you just go ahead, but not for government to give concession for school fees and whatever, because the Naira has been floated and we have just one rate. Now, the Daily Sun newspaper, House of Reps stops CBN universities, says no to Apex Bank's social media KYC policy. Varsities, Unity Schools tuition fee hike. Yes, of course, the recently federal universities and even Unity Schools were said to have raised their school fees, almost doubling it. But the House of Reps passing that motion, asking the federal government to stop, because in the face of difficulty arising from the removal of petroleum subsidy, arising from the devaluation of the naira, or the floating of the naira, as it were, there's hardship in the land. This is not the time to increase school fees at home. That's what the House of Reps is saying there. Now, the Tribune newspaper, of course, Tinubu, Plateau circle of violence must stop. Now, the story below the photograph in Tribune, Akpabio constitutes standing committees. Adeola heads appropriations committee at Daramodu Media. But another newspaper is saying, that's the Daily Sun, Senate standing committees, Akpabio snubs ex-governors, PDP ranking senators, names heads of appropriation public account 6 committees. So PDP, of course, taking some heat there as the party in opposition. Now, the Daily Trust newspaper, OPEC, false calls against funding of fossil fuel in Africa. We need to drive industrialization, African petroleum producers. NNPCL denies blocking oil and gas sector deals, allays IOC's divestment fears. Yes, OPEC calling for, faulting that call, because for the developing countries like Nigeria, we still depend on our crude oil. So fossil fuel for Africa, well, in as much as we also encourage the move to clean energy, but our oil, we must continue to sell to develop our nations. Now, the Nation newspaper, yes, Adamu incapacitation talk sparks row over Akeredolu Ondo State PDP crisis. Ondo State PDP raises dust. Deputy Governor, I spoke with him on Sunday. Of course, Abdullahi Adamu, the APC chairman, has since recast that statement that about incapacitation. Perhaps his choice of words were just at variance with the reality of Akeredolu's health. Well, is recast that statement, so we'll just leave it at that. Now, the foreign newspapers quickly. The Washington Post, Zelensky decries NATO timeline. Spat overshadows Lithuanian summit. Of course, Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was expecting a timeline for Ukraine joining NATO, but NATO, the heads of states of NATO, well, did not give that go ahead, and he's not happy about that, although he is grateful for the support received so far. Daily Telegraph, BBC sex scandal, presenter faces new allegation. That story still dominating the headlines in the UK. Ruben and Rufai.
I guess with NATO, which we discussed yesterday,
yeah,
you know, the fear of the big powers is not to be drawn into a larger conflict, because if you grant Ukraine, you know, membership approval at this point, it's going to escalate the conflict. And if you escalate the conflict and you put Russia in a more difficult situation, and it results in the decline of Russia, then you have the rise of China. So you solve one problem to create another problem. But of course, Zelensky will want Ukraine to be part of NATO. But the point was made by Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, that, well, Putin wanted to stop the advance of NATO. But what has now happened is that, you know, NATO has even expanded with Finland and Sweden, you know, so what he wanted to achieve originally by even stopping Ukraine, he has not achieved.
Which I mentioned yesterday, the unintended consequence of
Zelensky
Putin's
may be acting like Oliver Twist. He wants more, but at least he's closer to NATO now. He's been told that, you know, when the certain conditions are met, you know, he will still join. So, and they've given Ukraine an Israel-like, status in relation to NATO. So that he got something too at the end of the day. But you said something about these public officers collecting double emolument, and that maybe a law should come up.
Yes.
I thought on this same program, I had addressed that issue. I think it was Ojineka that brought the story. And I said, look, in 2019, SERAP, Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project, went to court. And the court of Justice Justice Oluremi Oguntoyinbo, granted the prayers of Serap. Serap was asking for an order of mandamus to compel the Attorney General of the Federation to go after state pension laws that allow governors to even collect big. And the office of the Attorney General said the office cannot inquire into state laws. And the judge ruled differently and said, Serap is right because one, in the 5th schedule and the 7th schedule of the Constitution, you are not allowed as a public officer in retirement to collect pension, and also when you get another position, you are collecting double emoluments. And that the office of the AGF can inquire into it. I think the level of the conversation is that we should be saying that all those senators, ministers, who have been former governors who are collecting double emolument should be identified and named, and that they should follow the example of Governor Daniel and the example of former Senate President Bukola Saraki before him, and Dr. Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti before him too, who had said publicly that nobody should pay them double emoluments. So that is the issue. This is the issue.
And at the presidency also.
Anyway, thank you, Emmanuel.